I've got two accident updates today for crashes that I'd previously done on video. The first you might remember is my report on the engine failure on takeoff of a Bonanza 236 Bravo Charlie at North Perry Airport in Florida. The second is PC-12 56 Kilo Juliet that appeared to be a spatial disorientation to me on takeoff into the snow. The final report is out for both, and the reasons that these accidents and the details are a bit of a surprise. So stick with me on FlyWire. Hi, I'm Scott Perdue. Today on FlyWire, the first accident I'm going to update on is the NTSB final report on the engine failure situation on takeoff of 236 Bravo Charlie, a B36TC at North Perry Airport in easy for you to say, in Pembroke Pines, Florida, not quite 2 years ago. There were 3 fatalities and 1 serious injury on this accident, and the pilot and owner of the imported Bonanza, he had a total of 640 hours in all aircraft, time and type unknown. The right front seat passenger had over 9,000 hours in all aircraft, and the airplane impacted a car on the road during the crash sequence, injuring the driver and killing the child in the right rear seat. Recall from the first video that this airplane was imported to the U.S. from South Africa by the pilot who was flying the airplane in the accident. One buyer had backed out on this airplane, and then this particular accident flight was the second flight after the airplane had been put back together after it was shipped to the U.S. To recap, a witness who had heard the accident airplane during its run-up before takeoff and reported it as sputtering and backfiring, and there was a very long run-up. Another witness, approximately 775 feet from the departure into runway 10 left, reported that the airplane was climbing slowly before suddenly losing the engine about 200 feet past the departure into the runway, and the Bonanza was reported to be less than 300 feet, something like between 200 and 300 feet in the air. He said the engine quit suddenly. It failed completely. It looked to him like the propeller stopped. It didn't actually, but the airplane remained in the same attitude for 1 to 2 seconds and then began a gentle right bank, became the same pitch, held the same pitch attitude, and it looked like the airplane stalled, spun, and descended nose down. He confirmed it was the right wing that was low. It spun to the right. He thought that by the sound of the engine quitting, it was much like the mixture was pulled to idle. It was that sudden, poof, and it wasn't running. I'll leave a link below to the original video in case you're interested in seeing it, both of the videos actually. The NTSB did a thorough look at the engine and the accident airplane to determine the cause. It seemed like they did a pretty thorough job, actually, in both these accidents. They found nothing wrong with the airplane. The engine examination revealed an intact and operational engine. The propeller had sheared off at impact and was found separated from the engine, but minimal damage had been imposed on the crankshaft. Most of the spark plugs, they noted, were exhibited a dark coloration consistent with a rich fuel-air mixture. Post-accident testing using only the engine-driven fuel pump revealed that at full throttle the engine made slightly less than rated RPM and manifold pressure, about 2,600 RPM instead of 2,700. But that power would have been sufficient to sustain flight and perform the takeoff. During subsequent operational testing at full throttle with the operating engine-driven fuel pump, the tester activated the test cell's electric fuel pump. Not said whether it's an actual Duke auxiliary pump or not, but he activated the pump, and that caused black smoke to come from the exhaust and the engine to suddenly lose total engine power. After that result, the test operator ran the engine again on only the engine-driven pump, and the engine worked fine. The 3-position aux fuel pump switch was found between low and off. The exact position could not be determined. The NTSB noted that during the accident sequence, it couldn't be determined actually. The NTSB noted that the sudden loss of engine power in the test cell upon activation of the aux fuel pump was exactly like the event as reported by accident witnesses. The NTSB investigator found that it was likely that the pilot flipped the aux fuel pump switch to high, flooding the engine, and then giving himself a total engine failure at 200 to 300 feet in a densely populated area with few opportunities for a forced landing. During the turn back, the pilot exceeded the critical angle of attack, departed the airplane from control flight, and it spun in and into its impact point in the car, the street, and ended up in the airport boundary fence. The NTSB talked to the pilot who had paid for the original inspection. Remember, one guy passed it up. He paid for an inspection of the airplane in South Africa before it was exported to the U.S., and when asked why he had backed out, he cited corrosion issues with the cylinders, and he shied away from the idea of taking the engine apart for a further inspection. There were no apparent issues with the airframe, and the airplane had been test flown, like I said before, once prior to the accident. They had done one test flight nearly 7 days before. The NTSB did not find any fuel contamination issues. No, by the way, it had just about 360 hours on the airplane and the engine. An engine shop did extensive testing with the engine from the accident airplane. There were some reports in the docket that the accident pilot had minimal time in a Bonanza, but there was no reference to time in the B36TC. No reference to actually how much Bonanza time he had either. The aux fuel pump is used for priming for start, to use in flight if the engine-driven fuel pump fails, or on low as a supplement to provide a steady fuel pressure to the engine in flight if you're having a little bit of surging or something like that. It is an issue in turbocharged airplanes. The accident pilot obviously had another theory related to the sputtering and backfiring condition of the engine during the run-up, and using the aux pump on high, fuel pump on high in normal operations is not a good idea. In fact, it is a checklist item warning that it should be off, and excessively high fuel flow can cause the engine combustion to cease during the takeoff roll. Kind of antiseptic verbiage, but there it goes. In other words, it'll make it quit. The use of the aux fuel pump on high is a viable theory that fits the facts, and given the engine operation in the test stand after the accident, it seems very likely it's true. However, the engine failure was not foreordained to result in 3 fatalities here. The bottom line is that the accident pilot did not fly the aircraft after the engine failure, and undoubtedly the event was a shock and he was unprepared to react to the reality of it. But without consideration to the low energy state and minimal altitude of the airplane at the time of the engine failure, the pilot defaulted to an attempt to turn back to the parallel runway. At 300 feet, the physics of it wouldn't have happened anyway. His only real choice is to land straight ahead on the road, try to avoid cars, or in the 90 degree, as I said in the original video. I think that the engine out on takeoff exercise is an appropriate event to practice. I see my other videos on how to conduct these. I think it could be dangerous, but it's something we all need to practice. We all need to take an engine failure at this juncture of a takeoff into consideration. It is a real threat. Doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen, so be prepared and be current. The second accident was a PC-12 crash on in the late November of 2019 in Chamberlain, South Dakota. The airplane was a company-owned, but it was operated on a personal flight, ostensibly on a family hunting trip. The accident flight was a return from Chamberlain to Idaho Falls, Idaho. The pilot and 8 passengers were killed in the crash, and 3 passengers were seriously injured. That's 12 people. There were more people on board the aircraft than there were seats. Normally there are between 6 and 9 seats in the PC-12. The computed weight, by the way, was 107 pounds over gross. The computed CG was in the range of 3.99 to 5.49, so 4 to 5.5 inches aft of the aft limit. The weather was IMC and blowing snow. A flight plan was filed and an IFR clearance was obtained. The aircraft had a lightweight data recorder and that also included a cockpit voice recorder aboard the airplane. It wasn't required to, but it did, and that was seminal, was very important in being able to figure out what happened. The pilot started the engine, taxied out, and took off into the snow showers. Okay, I've got a little video from the docket, and we're going to watch that here in a second. I'll put other pictures and other stuff like that right here. But the airplane crashed shortly after takeoff. The investigation revealed that the accident, the aircraft was being de-iced by hand, with multiple pictures of the T-tails showing ice buildup on portions of the horizontal surface, and you can see on the bullet nose of that ice dripping or frozen. The flaps were determined to be at 15 degrees. The engine inertial separator door was open. This is important stuff. De-ice boots power switch was on. Windshield heat was on. pitot heat on system 2 was on. 1 was off. Static port and AOA heat were on, and the propeller heat was on. The audio and data was downloaded from the data recorder normally with no damage to the unit, and they correlated the audio events with the data and showed that the engine start occurred at about 12:19 and 2 seconds. Taxi out began at 12:29 and 5 seconds, and the takeoff roll began at 12:31 and 59 seconds. The cockpit area mic recorded the stall warning horn at 12:32 and 29 seconds. Impact sounds were heard at 12:33 and 1 second, and the recording ended at 12:33 and 3 seconds. So the CVR actually tells the tale here, and we're going to spend some time on it. The voice audio recorded one of the pilot seat mics, and the question occurred. I don't know which person spoke, but the question was, how much ice was there this morning? And then the cockpit area mic recorded the answer. We don't know who actually said this, but it said, "Oh, there was a lot." The seat mic recorded, did it come off okay or not, or no? The cam mic recorded, well, no further conversation about the de-ice process or status of the ice accumulation have occurred. Was it still there, whatever? There was no more conversation. We don't know what they talked about, but we know from pictures that there was ice accumulation still in the airplane. The CVR recorded the AWOS as wind 1010 at 7, visibility 7 miles, in light snow, ceiling 500 feet overcast, temperature 1 degree C, dew point 1 C, and the altimeter 2930, blowing snow. The CVR also recorded the reception of the IFR clearance. The airport manager called 56 Kilo Juliet on the radio, and during that conversation, the manager said, "It don't look good to me. I don't know what you guys are thinking." The aircraft reply was, "Is the runway in good condition?" The airport manager said, "I would say that I can hardly keep up." The aircraft said, "All right, I'll be okay, 56 Kilo Juliet." Okay. The airport manager said, "What's that?" And then the aircraft said, "We're going to be just fine. I'm going to back taxi on through one, and we'll take off out of here, 6 Kilo Juliet." The airport manager said, "K, the runway is not clear." The aircraft responded and said, "Oh, I thought you had, let me back taxi down and look at it, and then I'll be back." The airport manager said, "You guys are crazy. I got berms on this thing. I got to get the snow out of here." The aircraft replied, "I think we're going to be just fine. Right down this one track you've made, 6 Kilo Juliet." The airport manager replied, "Guys, don't mind," and there were garbled sounds, and it's a little bit like problems with plowing through some drifts. The internal mic recorded the left seat occupant deriding the airport manager for not clearing the runways. What is he doing for 2 hours? And then commenting, "Oh, there's a nice track on the right there. We're fine. This thing will take off so fast." The right seat mic said, "How much space do you need?" The left seat said, "I need most of the runway, but I'll be good." There appeared to be some problem with traction getting the airplane turned around to line up with 3-1, a lot of prop noises and grunts and stuff like that, but eventually they got lined up. 30 seconds after beginning the takeoff roll, the automated alert system began announcing the stall. Okay, and this was shortly after weight off wheels. And in all, the stall warning activated 5 times during the accident sequence. The recording stopped less than 30 seconds after that. All airborne time was about 33 seconds. In the aircraft performance and simulation study, it was determined that the aircraft took off with accumulated precipitation, snow and ice, on the horizontal and vertical stabilizers, and likely on the elevator as well. POH requires that the whole aircraft be free of ice, snow, or any contaminants, and you can definitely see it on the fuselage. It was not clear. With the switch settings and configurations that I noted above, that's why I read them out, it actually puts the airplane in the mode called stick pusher ice mode. And this results in an increase of stall speed by 9 knots. The takeoff rotation speed should be 92 knots, and the stall speed at maximum takeoff weight is 87 knots. We know that it's more than max takeoff weight. Additionally, the investigation determined the airplane to be heavy with an aft CG. The manufacturer saw pictures of the airplane taxi and on the ground and noted that the airplane appeared to be squatting nose high, tail low, and that was not normal. That indicated an aft CG and a very heavy weight. So rotation with the data recorder was determined to occur at about 88 knots, 4 knots under the specified rotation speed. This most likely resulted in the stick shaker being activated almost immediately after liftoff, and the pitch angle increased to 15.8 degrees, decreased to 9.8 degrees, and then began oscillations, peaking at 21 degrees. So it was diverging like that. Then it's experienced a sudden drop, poof, that was the stall, decreasing to minus 24 degrees at the end of the day, and that was all the way to the end of the data. The maximum altitude of the aircraft was determined that it reached to 380 feet above the ground just before the stall occurred. And one important note was that the pilot's takeoff technique was much more abrupt than normal. And given to be able to match everything, and they've got other inputs, they were able to figure that out. And given the heavy weight in the aft CG, this contributed to the pitch variations, very light stick, experienced during the 33 seconds of flight. Okay, so he was in and out approaching the stall, in and out of that stall warning four additional times other than that first one. To summarize all of this, the pilot attempted to use a tool to remove snow and ice from the airplane while frozen precipitation was falling. It was going on as fast as he could get it off. He did not completely remove the snow and ice accumulations from the horizontal and vertical tail surfaces of the fuselage, or the fuselage. There were more people aboard than seats, and the aircraft was loaded at 107 pounds above max gross weight. The airplane was loaded with a CG between 3.99 to 5.49 inches after the aft limit, significantly decreasing the longitudinal, that's pitch, stability of the airplane. And then the pilot abruptly rotated the aircraft 4 knots below the POH rotation speed, and the stick shaker pusher activated immediately, right after weight off wheels. Given the light stick forces, the PIO was entered, and that diverged until the aerodynamic stall occurred. Okay, I don't know what else to say here, but many serious errors here, all apparently driven by a get-home-itis. The PC-12 is a robust airplane and a very capable. This accident goes to show you that pilot technique and headwork is critical for survival. You know, maybe a great airplane, but it's not going to save you. Think about this one and all the links in this particular accident chain. A better story for this family would be, hey, do you remember that time most of us got stuck in South Dakota just before Thanksgiving, instead of the way this one turned out? Absolute disaster. What a catastrophe. If you'd like to subscribe, it looks like this, a bit like this here, and I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters here as well. If you'd like to support the channel, I'll leave a link in the description below. Meanwhile, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time on FlyWire.